Sir, step away from that vehicle right now.
I'm a customer. I came in to look at
I
this
have a
car.
report you've been causing problems. Step away from the vehicle and come with me.
I haven't caused any problems. I've been standing here looking at a car I intend to purchase.
Sir, I'm not going to ask you again.
A man walks into a Ferrari dealership to buy a car. He is detained, handcuffed, and escorted out in front of everyone. His name is James Carter. He is 57 years old. He is an executive board member of the Vanguard Group, a firm managing $9.3 trillion in assets and the retirement security of more than 50 million Americans. He has purchased 3 Ferraris in cash. He has owned them for 14 years. And on the afternoon of September 9th, 2024, he was handcuffed inside a dealership on Meridian Boulevard, Harrington, Virginia, for standing next to one. Officer Dale Grant is 38 years old and has 11 years on the Harrington Police Department. He has 3 prior complaints in his file. All 3 were filed by black men. All 3 describe the same pattern. All 3 were dismissed without consequence. This arrest will generate a $7.2 million lawsuit, the first ever conviction under Harrington's anti-discrimination ordinance, and a set of reforms that will permanently alter how police operate in every commercial district in the city. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below if you believe every person deserves to be treated with respect the moment they walk through a door, regardless of what they look like, what they are wearing, or what someone else assumes about them. Because what happened on Meridian Boulevard on September 9th did not begin with Dale Grant. It began with a system that dismissed 3 complaints, protected a pattern, and gave one officer the confidence to believe he would never face real consequences. He was wrong. James Robert Carter was born on March 14, 1967, in the Linwood neighborhood of Harrington, Virginia, the second of 4 children. His father, William Carter, drove a city bus for 31 years. His mother, Gloria Carter, worked as an administrative coordinator at Harrington General Hospital for 28 years. They were not wealthy, but they were clear-eyed about the world their son was growing up inside. His mother told him 2 things from the time he was old enough to understand them. The first was that no room in America was too good for him. The second was that preparation was the only thing that reliably converted injustice into consequence. He took both seriously. Carter earned a full academic scholarship to Georgetown University, graduated magna cum laude in economics in 1989, completed his MBA at Harvard Business School in 1991, spent a decade at Fidelity Investments, rising from junior analyst to senior portfolio manager before being recruited to the Vanguard Group in 2003. Over the following 2 decades, he built a reputation as one of the most rigorous and principled minds in institutional investment management. Appointed to Vanguard's executive board in 2019, he now oversees institutional strategy for a firm whose assets under management exceed the gross domestic product of every country on Earth except 2. He has been on the cover of Forbes. He has sat in White House economic briefings. He has shaped the retirement security of 50 million Americans. He was wearing khaki pants, a navy polo shirt, and white New Balance 990s when he did all of it. That was not an accident. Carter had decided early in his career that the kind of person who judged him by what he was wearing was exactly the kind of person he needed to identify quickly. He had been stopped, questioned, followed, and made to feel like a threat in commercial spaces in his own city more times than he had counted. He had built one of the most consequential careers in American finance in spite of it. And he had learned, with a patience that had taken 30 years to develop, exactly what to do when it happened again. On the morning of September 9th, 2024, James Carter checked his phone. He had a board call at 10, a lunch meeting at 12:30, and an afternoon that was, for once, entirely his own. He decided to go look at a Ferrari. Carter arrived at 4521 Meridian Boulevard at 2:31 p.m. He drove himself in a dark blue 2015 Ford F-150 he had owned for 9 years. He parked in the visitor spaces, walked through the glass doors, nodded at the receptionist, and moved directly to the SF90 Stradale he had seen on the dealership's website the previous evening. Rosso Corsa exterior, black interior, hybrid configuration. He had been tracking this model for several months and wanted to examine it in person before placing an order. He stood beside it and looked. He did not touch it, did not lean on it, did not open the door or press his face against the glass. He stood at a respectful distance and studied the rear quarter panel, the visible components of the hybrid power unit beneath the engine cover, the interior layout through the window. This was how Carter had always looked at cars before buying them, methodically, carefully, with the attention of someone who understood exactly what he was evaluating. For 11 minutes, not one person on the sales floor approached him. Craig Dunfield was 49 years old and had been selling luxury cars for 19 years, the last 7 at Premier Ferrari of Harrington. He watched Carter from across the floor for 4 minutes. He watched the khaki pants, the polo shirt, the sneakers. He watched Carter stand still and look at the most expensive car in the building. And he made a calculation that had nothing to do with Carter's behavior and everything to do with what Dunfield assumed a man who looked like Carter could and could not afford. At 2:41 p.m., 10 minutes before he said a single word to Carter, Dunfield picked up his desk phone and called the Harrington Police Department's non-emergency line. He reported, and this is what the call record shows, a male acting suspiciously on the sales floor, refusing to engage with staff and lingering near a high-value display vehicle. Carter had not refused to engage with staff. No staff had spoken to him. Dunfield's call took 4 minutes. He hung up, smoothed his tie, and finally crossed the floor. He had never sold Craig Dunfield anything, but in 4 minutes he had just bought himself a lawsuit. Dunfield reached Carter at 2:43 p.m. "Sir," one word, the full weight of a decision already made inside it. "Can I ask what you're doing?" "Looking at this car," Carter said. "I'm interested in purchasing it." Dunfield's eyes moved once, briefly, efficiently, from Carter's polo to his sneakers and back. "This model starts at $340,000. "I know what it costs," Carter said. "I'd like to go through the configuration options. We have a verification process for cash purchases above a certain threshold. If you haven't brought documentation today..." "I've purchased 3 Ferraris," Carter said. "I have never been asked to verify funds before placing an order. It's our internal policy." "It's a policy you apply selectively," Carter said. His voice had not changed, still even, still precise, still carrying the quality of a man carefully recording everything being said. "I'd like to speak with whoever can walk me through the build options." Dunfield looked at him for a long moment. Then he said the words that ended his career. "I've already made a call, just to have someone come and check on things." Carter looked at him steadily. "You called the police." "I called for assistance. Because I'm a black man who has been standing next to an expensive car for 12 minutes without buying it." Dunfield said nothing. Carter reached into his breast pocket and opened his phone camera. He held it at his side, lens facing outward, and he waited. Think about what he was doing in that moment. A 57-year-old man who had built a career managing $9.3 trillion in assets, who had been stopped, questioned, and treated as suspicious in his own city more times than he could count, who was now standing in a showroom waiting for police to arrive because a salesman could not conceive of a legitimate reason a black man in khaki pants might want to buy a Ferrari. He was not panicking. He was not arguing. He was not leaving. He was documenting. Officer Dale Grant arrived at 2:47 p.m. He came through the glass doors with the practiced efficiency of an officer who had been told what the situation was and had already decided what it meant. Dunfield intercepted him near the entrance, spoke briefly, gestured across the floor. Grant nodded. His eyes found Carter beside the Ferrari, and his assessment took 2 seconds. He crossed the showroom floor, right hand at his belt. The officer's voice hit first, sharp, immediate, carrying the practiced authority of someone who had already decided how this was going to go. "Sir, step away from that vehicle right now." The man beside the Ferrari turned slowly, both hands visible. His voice was calm, almost deliberate, the voice of someone who understood that every word he said was going into a record. "I'm a customer. I came in to look at this car." Grant didn't pause, didn't ask a follow-up question, didn't look around the showroom for context. "I have a report you've been causing problems. Step away and come with me." "I haven't caused any problems. I've been standing here looking at a car I intend to purchase." Still calm, still precise. The kind of composure that only comes from a man who has been in this situation before and has spent years deciding exactly how he would handle it when it came again. "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again. Can you tell me what I've done wrong? What is the legal basis?" Grant cut him off before the sentence was finished. "Turn around, hands behind your back." A beat of silence, the kind that lands differently in a room full of people watching. "You're arresting me for standing in a car dealership. Suspicious behavior and failure to comply. Turn around, now." Carter turned slowly, hands rising to shoulder height. His phone still recording from his breast pocket, lens facing outward, capturing everything Grant's body camera was capturing from the other direction. 2 angles, 1 moment, nothing left undocumented. His voice, when it came, was not angry. It was something more deliberate than anger. It was the voice of a man building a record in real time, word by word, because he understood that the record was the only thing that would matter later. "I want it stated clearly on your camera. I have not touched this vehicle. I have not threatened anyone. I have committed no offense." Grant's response came while the handcuffs were already being applied. "You can say all of that at the station." The metal clicked into place. Carter's final words went into both cameras simultaneously, clear and steady, carrying the particular weight of a man who had just watched something happen that he knew, with absolute certainty, was not going to end at the station. This is racial profiling, and every second of it is being recorded. The showroom stayed silent for a moment after they walked out. Then someone near the reception desk exhaled. A salesperson looked at the floor. The couple in the far corner, still standing beside the California tea they had stopped pretending to examine several minutes earlier, looked at each other and said nothing. The red SF90 Stradale sat exactly where it had been, undisturbed, untouched, under its spotlight. Just as it had been for the entire 11 minutes James Carter had stood beside it, doing nothing more than looking at a car he intended to buy. James Carter arrived at Harrington Police Department District 3 headquarters at 3:09 p.m. He was processed, photographed, and placed in an interview room. Still wearing khaki pants, a navy polo shirt, and white New Balance sneakers, he sat with his hands folded on the table and said very little. He had asked once, clearly and calmly, for his phone call. He had been told he would get it shortly. Shortly became 40 minutes. At 3:51 p.m., Sergeant Louise Andrade walked into the processing area and picked up Grant's arrest report. She read it once. Then she read it again. Suspicious behavior. Failure to comply. She looked up at the intake officer. What exactly was he doing? Standing next to a car, the intake officer said, according to the report. Andrade looked back at the paper. Standing next to a car, in a car dealership. That's what it says. She set the report down and walked to the interview room. She opened the door and looked at the man sitting at the table. Khaki pants, polo shirt, hands folded, completely composed. The portrait of a man who had decided, a long time ago, that composure was a form of power. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Andrade. Can you tell me your full name?" "James Robert Carter," he said, executive board member, the Vanguard Group. "I was attempting to purchase a vehicle at Premier Ferrari of Harrington when your officer detained and handcuffed me without legal basis." Andrade held his gaze for 2 full seconds. Then she walked back to her desk, sat down, and ran his name through the system. The results came back in 45 seconds. Vanguard Group, $9.3 trillion in assets under management. Executive board member. Prior Ferrari purchases documented in registration records. A 488 Pista, a Roma, an F8 Tributo, all registered to James Robert Carter at a Westfield Estates address in Harrington, Virginia. Andrade sat back in her chair. Then she picked up her phone and called her captain. Captain Howard Briggs arrived at District 3 headquarters at 4:22 p.m. He had driven from a department meeting across town. He had not finished the drive before he understood, from the 40-second phone call with Andrade, exactly what kind of situation he was walking into. He reviewed Grant's body cam footage in the hallway outside the interview room. He watched the full 7 minutes from Grant's arrival at the dealership to Carter's arrest. He watched Carter state clearly, on camera, that he had committed no offense. He watched Grant apply handcuffs to a man who had spent 11 minutes standing beside a car and 20 minutes asserting his legal rights calmly and precisely. Then he reviewed Grant's personnel file. 3 complaints, all filed by black men in commercial areas of District 3. All dismissed. Dr. Raymond Aldis in 2018, Jerome Sims in 2020, Dr. Okafor's husband in 2022. The same behavior, 3 times, no real consequences. And now a 4th incident involving a man whose name was on the Vanguard Group's board of directors. Briggs closed the file. He walked into the interview room. James Carter looked up at him without surprise. "Mr. Carter," Briggs said, "I'm Captain Howard Briggs. I have reviewed the body cam footage of your arrest. I want to be direct with you. Officer Grant did not have probable cause to arrest you. You are being released immediately. I am personally apologizing for what happened today, and I want you to know that this will be investigated fully." Carter stood. He straightened his polo shirt. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying the measured, unambiguous authority of a man who had spent 30 years in rooms full of people who needed to understand exactly where they stood. "An apology is a starting point, not an ending point. I want everything that happened today documented completely. I want Officer Grant's body cam footage preserved. I want his personnel file reviewed, and I want it understood clearly that I will be pursuing every available legal remedy." He picked up his phone from the table where it had been placed during processing. "I've been here for 1 hour and 33 minutes. I was arrested for standing next to a car in a dealership. And the only reason I am standing in this room right now is that my name came back on a database." He paused. "Let that land. The man who was here before me, and the one before him, and the one before him, their names came back too. Nobody called a captain." He walked out. 6 weeks after his arrest and release, on October 21, 2024, James Carter's legal team filed suit in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. Carter versus City of Harrington, Officer Dale Grant, and Premier Ferrari of Harrington LLC. The claims were specific and extensively documented. Unlawful arrest and detention in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Racial discrimination in a commercial transaction under Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Malicious prosecution. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. And named separately against Craig Dunfield and Premier Ferrari of Harrington. A violation of Harrington's municipal anti-discrimination ordinance, prohibiting the racially motivated use of emergency services. The evidence was, by the city attorney's own internal assessment, overwhelming. Grant's body cam footage showed the full arrest. Carter's calm, repeated statements that he had committed no offense. His explicit assertion of his legal rights. Grant's application of handcuffs to a man who had done nothing but stand in a showroom and ask a legal question. Carter's phone recording, captured simultaneously from his breast pocket, provided a second, uninterrupted audio and video record of every word spoken. The dealership's security footage showed Carter's 11 minutes of standing beside the SF90 without touching it, without approaching any staff, and without engaging in any behavior that any reasonable person could describe as suspicious. Dunfield's 911 call record showed the call was placed at 2:41 p.m., 10 minutes before Dunfield spoke a single word to the man he was reporting. He had called the police before he had any interaction with Carter whatsoever. And then there was Grant's personnel file. Dr. Raymond Aldis, Jerome Sims, Dr. Okafor's husband. 3 complaints. 3 black men in commercial spaces on Meridian Boulevard. 3 dismissals. The pattern was not a theory. It was a documented record, preserved in the department's own files, of a behavior that had been observed, reviewed, and protected 3 separate times. The city reviewed the evidence package on November 4, 2024. Their attorney's internal memo to the City Council concluded in its final paragraph. The evidence in this matter does not present a defensible case. We recommend immediate settlement negotiations. $7.2 million. The settlement was reached on March 3, 2025, 5 months after the lawsuit was filed. $1.4 million to James Carter in compensatory damages, covering wrongful arrest, unlawful detention, emotional distress, and reputational harm. $5.8 million in punitive damages, assessed against the City of Harrington for maintaining a pattern of dismissed complaints that enabled and protected Grant's conduct across 3 prior documented incidents. The settlement against Premier Ferrari of Harrington was reached separately on February 19, 2025, for $1.6 million, covering racial discrimination in a commercial transaction and the racially motivated call to emergency services. The individual consequences were specific and permanent. Officer Dale Grant was suspended without pay on September 10, 2024. Internal Affairs completed its review on October 24th and concluded that Grant's conduct represented a documented pattern of racially biased enforcement, not an isolated error. He was terminated the same day. The union filed for arbitration. The arbitrator, reviewing the body cam footage in which Grant applied handcuffs to a man who had done nothing actionable, upheld the termination on December 3, 2024. Grant lost his badge. He lost his pension. He lost his appeal. He works in warehouse logistics in Fredericksburg. His law enforcement career is permanently and irrevocably closed. Craig Dunfield was terminated on September 10, 2024. His applications to 4 competing dealerships were declined after background checks revealed the circumstances of his termination. On November 14, 2024, the Harrington District Attorney charged him under the city's anti-discrimination ordinance for the racially motivated 911 call. The call made 10 minutes before he had spoken a single word to the man he was reporting. Dunfield pleaded no contest on January 8, 2025. Maximum fine, suspended sentence. The first conviction under an ordinance that had existed since 2021 and never once been enforced. Gerald Patton, the dealership owner, was required by Ferrari North America to implement mandatory staff retraining, submit to quarterly customer experience audits for a minimum of 2 years, and establish an anonymous reporting mechanism for customers who experienced discriminatory treatment. 3 additional sales staff identified during Ferrari's internal audit as having engaged in selective customer treatment based on appearance were terminated. The 3 supervisors who had dismissed Grant's prior complaints were each subject to formal disciplinary review. 2 received written reprimands. 1. The sergeant who had described the 2022 handcuffing of a cardiologist inside a watch boutique as an isolated judgment error unlikely to recur was demoted 1 full rank. The systemic reforms that followed were mandatory, measurable, and immediate. Every officer in District 3 completed a 40-hour constitutional policing course before returning to commercial patrol. Body cam footage from all commercial area stops was subject to monthly random review by an independent civilian oversight board with the authority to recommend discipline. Any officer receiving 2 complaints of racially motivated stops within a 24-month period was automatically flagged for retraining and placed on a 6-month performance review. And for the first time in the department's history, stop data disaggregated by race was published publicly on a quarterly basis. $7.2 million bought policy changes, training requirements, oversight mechanisms, individual accountability that was documented, public, and permanent. It did not change the calculation that happened at 2:41 p.m. on September 9, 2024. The calculation where Craig Dunfield watched a black man stand beside a Ferrari for 10 minutes and reached for his phone before saying a single word to him. The calculation that produced the words, acting suspiciously and lingering near a high-value display vehicle. Words that had no basis in anything Carter had done, and every basis in what Dunfield assumed about who Carter was, where he belonged, and what he could afford. That calculation is not a policy violation. It is not something a 40-hour training course eliminates. It is a way of seeing, about who belongs in certain spaces, who is credible by default, who is assumed to have a legitimate reason for being where they are, and who must prove it before they are treated with basic dignity. It does not disappear because it becomes expensive. It goes quiet for a while. It learns new language. And then it reaches for a phone again, in a different dealership, in a different city, against a different man who never should have had to fight for the right to look at a car. The settlement made it expensive. It made it painful. It made it public in a way that ended 2 careers and cost a city $7.2 million. It created consequences that will follow every person involved for the rest of their professional lives. But James Carter paid a price that should never have been required of him. 1 hour and 33 minutes in a police interview room, handcuffed on a Tuesday afternoon in the city where he was born, in the commercial corridor 3 miles from the neighborhood where his mother told him that no room in America was too good for him. The specific, irreducible humiliation of being treated as a criminal while doing nothing more than looking at something he could afford to buy 10 times over. That price was paid before the lawsuit was filed, before the settlement was reached, before Grant lost his badge and Dunfield lost his career, and DeSargent lost his rank. It was paid in a showroom that smelled of leather and money, by a man who had done nothing wrong and knew, with 30 years of experience behind him, exactly what was happening and exactly why. Here is the cautionary tale that every business, every police department, and every individual in a position of assumed authority needs to sit with. Craig Dunfield had 19 years of experience in luxury automotive sales. He had sold cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He considered himself an expert at reading people. And in 4 minutes of watching a man stand quietly and look at a car, he made a decision that cost his employer $1.6 million, cost himself his career, resulted in a criminal conviction under a law that had never previously been enforced, and permanently attached his name to a case that will be cited in civil rights training programs for years. He did not make that decision because he was having a bad day. He made it because he had been making versions of the same decision for years, in small ways that nobody had ever made expensive enough to stop. The lesson that Dunfield never received until September 9, 2024, when it arrived at the cost of everything, is that bias is not a private matter. It does not stay inside your assumptions. It moves through your hands. It picks up a phone. It calls the police. And eventually, if the person on the receiving end has the documentation and the resources and the 30 years of preparation that James Carter had, it finds its way into a federal lawsuit and a $7.2 million settlement and a permanent record that follows you out of every room you try to walk into afterward. The system changed its policies. It did not change the thinking that made the policies necessary. That thinking will produce another incident. In another dealership, or a bank lobby, or a hotel, or a boutique on a commercial corridor in a city that has convinced itself it does not have this problem. And the person it happens to next will almost certainly not be an executive board member of Vanguard. They will not have 900,000 LinkedIn followers or a name that generates consequences when it appears on a database. They will have the same rights James Carter had. They will just have far fewer resources to enforce them. And that is the part of this story that the settlement cannot resolve. The part that the training courses cannot address. The part that will still be true the day after every reform is implemented and every box is checked and every report is filed. Until the assumption itself changes, the assumption about who belongs, who is credible, who is trustworthy by default, and who must earn it, the next James Carter is already standing somewhere, hands at his sides, waiting for someone to make the mistake that will define everything that comes next. James Carter walked into a Ferrari dealership on a Tuesday afternoon to look at a car he had been considering for several months. He was 57 years old. He was an executive board member of the Vanguard Group. He had purchased 3 Ferraris in cash over 14 years. He was wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt. A salesman called the police before speaking to him. An officer with 3 dismissed complaints in his file arrived, handcuffed him, and escorted him out of the building in full view of everyone present. Carter was held for 1 hour and 33 minutes. He was released when a database returned his name. The lawsuit settled for $7.2 million. Grant lost his badge and his pension. Dunfield was convicted under a law that had never been used before, and the first conviction under that ordinance happened because Carter had his phone camera running before Grant ever walked through the door. Because his mother told him, when he was young enough to still be learning what the world was, that preparation was the only thing that turned injustice into consequence. The SF90 Stradale sits in his garage now, in Grigio Silverstone with red interior stitching, purchased 3 weeks after his arrest from a dealership whose general manager called his office on September 10th to express his disgust and extend an invitation. Carter arrived unannounced. Same khakis, same polo, same New Balance 990s. He was helped the moment he walked through the door. He still lives in Harrington. He still drives the F-150. He still walks into every room dressed exactly the way he chooses. And he still carries his phone with the camera ready, because the world has not yet given him a reason to stop. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you feel watching this story unfold? Was it anger? Recognition? Exhaustion? Something you have no word for yet, but have carried for a long time? What do you think should happen to officers who dismiss legitimate complaints of racial profiling and then watch those same patterns produce lawsuits that cost their cities millions? Should supervisors who sign off on dismissals face personal legal liability when the behavior continues? Should there be a federal public database of officers with documented patterns of racially motivated stops, so that the next department cannot simply rehire the problem the previous one refused to address? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Leave your questions. Leave your experiences if you have them, because many of you do. This story reached you for a reason, and your perspective matters in this conversation. If this story moved you, share it, not for the numbers, but because the next person it happens to may not have a business card that changes the temperature in the room, may not have 14 years of Ferrari purchase history in a database, may not have a mother who taught them, early enough to matter, exactly how to stand still and let every second be recorded. Share it for that person. We will see you in the next story, and there will be a next story, because until the assumption changes, there always is.